This Roblox player started losing time, first a few seconds, and then entire hours he could never account for. He would blink at his desk in daylight and open his eyes to a dark and silent room. Whole pieces of his day were simply vanishing, with no memory of what had happened inside them. What Milo found waiting for him inside that lost time is something you truly need to hear tonight. Milo was 13, and he had always had a sharp, reliable memory and a strong sense of time. He was the kind of kid who always knew roughly what time it was without ever checking a clock. That small, silly talent had always made him feel completely in control of his own quiet life. He liked his routines, he liked order, and he had never once lost track of an entire afternoon. But that autumn, his sleep had quietly collapsed, and he was running on almost nothing at all. He stayed up past 2 most nights playing Roblox, then forced himself through school half awake. On top of that, he was stressed about everything, from grades to friends to a home that felt tense. He did not know it yet, but a mind that is exhausted and overwhelmed can start to skip. His father worked nights, his mother worked late, and the afternoons usually belonged to Milo alone. He would come home to an empty house, drop his bag, and lose himself in games until dark. That empty, quiet house would end up being where he first noticed that his own time was breaking. He had always felt safe there, right up until the day the clock stopped making sense to him. For most of his life, time had moved for Milo the way it moves for everyone, steadily and forward. 1 second followed another, one class followed the next, and the day always made simple sense. So the first time a piece of it went missing, Milo was absolutely certain he had just imagined it. He told himself he had simply zoned out for a second, the way anyone does when they are tired. But a small, uneasy part of his mind had already begun to quietly count the gaps that were appearing. Because losing time is one of the oldest and deepest fears that a human being can ever feel. And Milo was about to learn exactly where that ancient little fear had truly come from. It started on an ordinary Wednesday when Milo sat down at his desk to start his homework. He opened his notebook, he clicked his pen, and he looked down at the very first blank page. Then he blinked, and when he opened his eyes again, the room outside his window was completely dark. His clock said that almost 2 full hours had passed since he had sat down at that desk. He had no memory of those 2 hours at all, not a single second of them anywhere in his mind. His homework was still blank, his pen was still in his hand, and his heart began to race. Here is a real and well-studied fact about what a badly sleep-deprived brain actually does to you. When you do not sleep enough, your brain forces tiny naps called microsleeps, lasting only a few seconds. During them, your eyes can stay open, and you can even keep moving, but your brain records nothing at all. People almost never notice them happening, and simply believe that they were awake the entire time. So Milo told himself that this was all it was, just exhaustion stealing little pieces of his day. He splashed cold water on his face and stared at himself in the mirror for a long moment. He went to bed early that night, determined to sleep, and sure that the gaps would stop appearing. But the next afternoon, another hour vanished, and this time it did not leave him empty-handed. When he came back to himself at his desk, there was a finished drawing lying there in front of him. It was a careful, detailed drawing of his own house at night, and Milo had no memory of making it. A whole finished thing had appeared in the world, made by his hands, while he had simply not been there. The drawing was done in his own pen, in his own careful style, but he could not remember a single line. Over the next 2 weeks, the gaps in Milo's days grew longer, and they began to fill up with things. He would lose an hour and find his shoes muddy, or a snack eaten, or a window quietly opened. Once, he came back to himself standing in his own kitchen, holding the phone, with no idea why. His step counter showed long walks he did not remember taking, sometimes late at night while everyone slept. Each new gap left a little more behind it, as if someone were slowly moving into his missing time. There is another real and important reason that a stressed mind can lose whole pieces of time like this. It is called dissociation, and it is the brain's way of protecting itself when life becomes too overwhelming. Under heavy stress, your mind can detach so completely that hours seem to vanish in a single moment. Doctors say a distorted sense of time is one of the most common signs of a mind under too much pressure. So Milo repeated these facts to himself, again and again, trying to build a wall against his rising fear. But no fact he knew could explain the thing he found on his phone after one long-lost hour. In his Notes app, typed neatly during the time he could not remember, was a short message to himself. It was written in his own words, in the way only he wrote, and yet he had never typed it. And almost every culture on Earth has an old and uneasy story about people who lose their missing hours. They tell of a stolen hour, a gap in the night, and the fear of what fills you when you are gone. The warning that echoes through all of those stories is always about the danger of the empty, unwatched self. Milo had been leaving himself empty and unwatched, hour after hour, for almost 3 exhausting weeks. And a few days later, he finally read the message that the lost hour had left waiting on his phone. The message was only 4 words long, and it made the whole room go silent and cold around him. It said, simply, "Please stop coming back," typed calmly into his phone during an hour he had lost. Milo stared at those words, written in his own hand, and he had truly never been so afraid. So he finally did the bravest and smartest thing that anyone in his situation could possibly do. He sat his mother down and he told her everything. The gaps, the drawings, the walks, the message. She did not laugh at him, and she did not call him crazy, and she took every word very seriously. Here is something genuinely important, and it is true whether the cause is ordinary or something stranger. Losing time is real. And it is often just exhaustion or stress, but it is always worth checking on. It does not mean you are broken, and the safest thing you can do is tell someone and see a doctor. The very next week, Milo's mother took him to a doctor who ran careful tests and asked gentle questions. The doctor explained that a tired, overwhelmed brain can lose time and helped him start to sleep and rest. His mother started leaving work early just so Milo would not have to face those long afternoons alone. For a while, his whole tired family quietly arranged their days around never leaving him by himself. For a while it worked. The gaps shrank, and Milo began to feel like the steady owner of his days again. He truly believed that rest and honesty had closed the holes in his time for good. Then, his father showed him a clip from the small security camera above their own front door. It was time-stamped in the middle of one of Milo's longest and most completely lost hours. And in the clip, Milo was not asleep on his feet, and he was not blank. And he was not stumbling. He was standing perfectly still at the door, wide awake and calm, staring straight up into the camera. The version of Milo that lived inside those lost hours was awake and calm and doing things on purpose. And it was not the same version of Milo that came back afterward, remembering nothing at all. And here is the part of this whole story that I truly need every single one of you to understand. It does not matter whether it was a brain running on empty or something using the gaps he left open. Both of those answers lead to the exact same rule that finally kept Milo safe and whole again. When you lose yourself, you do not hide it, and you tell the people who love you right away. You rest. You get real help, and you never leave yourself empty and unwatched night after night. The gaps had no power over Milo until the weeks he spent exhausted, stressed, and completely alone with them. His tiredness and his silence were the only 2 things those lost hours were ever really made of. Exhaustion hollows you out, and fear moves into the empty space, and together, they can steal your very self. Whatever moved his hands in the dark had needed him worn down and quiet and far too afraid to tell. The most frightening thing was not the message, and it was not the calm face staring into the camera. It was the 4 quiet words that some hidden part of him had begged, asking Milo to please stop returning. Over the next few months, Milo slept more, leaned on his family, and slowly stopped losing his time. As his exhaustion faded and his stress eased, the gaps closed and his days became whole and steady again. He kept seeing the doctor, he kept his routine, and he never spent his evenings completely alone anymore. He let himself believe that the whole terrifying autumn was finally, safely, and truly behind him. Then, one quiet evening, months later, he blinked at his desk and lost a single minute of time. It was small and it was brief, and a year earlier, he would never have even noticed it at all. But when he looked down at his phone, there was one new line of text sitting in his notes. It was typed in his own words during that one lost minute, and it simply said, "Not yet." Milo did not panic, and he did not stare at it for hours, and he did not face it alone. He picked up the phone, he walked down the hall, and he showed the message to his mother that night. And Milo finally understood the one thing that this whole strange and frightening autumn had been trying to teach. You are only ever truly safe when you refuse to carry the darkest things all by yourself. Have you ever lost a piece of time and found something waiting that you do not remember doing? Tell me exactly what happened down in the comments below, because I really do want to know. If you watched all the way to the end, then you already know to never carry these things alone. Subscribe so you never miss another story that keeps you and the people you love a little safer. Take care of each other out there, and I will see you again in the very next one.